So welcome to my two best exercises for delt growth. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you know that I have really struggled with my kind of delt growth, specifically in the early years of my training. The last couple of years is probably when I started to really grow my delts. They're by no means a strong area, but they were pretty crap. Now they're less crap. And now we're trying to make them extremely strong area. Yeah? So, I'm going to share with you a few kind of key pointers and how I've made them a semi-decent area and how I'm going to make them a strong area with a few exercises that I quite like. And also, with coaching many people, this has contributed to a lot of delt growth too, and today I'm going to share a couple of exercises that have helped them as well. So, a couple of things that have kind of happened, especially in my early years of training. Now, I had no real focus of exercise selection, I had no real focus on kind of execution, I had no real focus on the general setup as well. A general setup of a movement is something that's heavily neglected. We could just go onto a machine and then just kind of do, but essentially if we haven't set the machine up and we can't kind of repeat that setup, it's going to feel very different each time. So we'll start off with that in mind. Mainly if an exercise doesn't if you're doing something, for example, like a chest press, you want to feel it in the chest, you don't want to feel it in your kind of quads, right? The same with like the kind of delt growth. If we're doing something like a lat raise, we want to ideally feel it in the delt. I was going to say lat then because it's a lat raise, but we want to feel it in the delt. We don't really want to be feeling it in kind of the traps. We don't want to be feeling it in kind of the rhomboids, right? We want to be feeling it right here. So if you're feeling it in a different area, it's probably a shit exercise for you. I used to run dumbbell lat raises into the ground. Essentially, when I started to think about execution, I realized that I was just getting a ton of, number one, niggles, kind of my forearm, my elbows just felt very cranky with it, and also I could just solely feel it in my traps. It's probably why I have semi-decent traps. Now, I will also caveat this and say that these exercises, the ones I'm going to be recommending, they might not fit everyone. For example, if I give you these exercises, but they still feel poor, going from that kind of criteria of where do you feel it, if you don't feel it in the delts, it's probably not a good exercise for you and you should probably do something else. Anyway, let's get into it. So there's technically going to be 3 exercises that I'm going to be recommending, but 2 are kind of very similar. Now, one of them is going to be a Y raise, specifically a dumbbell Y raise, and the other one is going to be a crucifix kind of cuffed lat raise. These 2 both align very, very nicely with the medial delt. Again, like a normal dumbbell variation where you just kind of here standing up. You kind of 9 times out of 10 I find that people just feel it in the traps and not necessarily the delt. Also with that variation, you have to cue it up a lot. Like you can't, people just go into the gym and they just raise, but essentially to get it like spot on and you don't feel your traps, you have to do a lot of cueing, because essentially we just want to go into a gym and just not think, we just want to train. So with the Y raise and also with the crucifix raise, we can just go into the gym and it hits the medial delt with minimal cues. Basically, it's very time efficient as well. Now for a crucifix lat raise, you're going to be kind of, if you are working the kind of right delt, you're going to be using the left cable and vice versa, and you're going to cross over. I typically like setting up the cable at hip height and then having some sort of a bench, and then from there, your basically delt is in one position and all you can do is just cue arms out. That's essentially it. I also like using cuffs. I have tried it with D-handles before, but I tend to find it puts your forearm in a bit of a weird position. But using the cuffs would actually mean that the weight is closer to the medial delt, which actually means that you're going to be kind of saving your joints a lot more than something like a dumbbell where the weight is at the end of the kind of range. Now, the Y raise is going to be in that range, but it's putting your delt in a very comfortable position. Typically with a Y raise, you wouldn't necessarily be able to do or hit the same amount of weight as you would with a traditional kind of normal kind of raise or lat raise, but you're going to be getting a lot more stimulus here. So essentially we're going to put our delt in kind of a forward position, which is actually very favorable for the delt. So I like to have a bench at around a 30 to 45 degree incline, and then all we're going to be doing is cueing push arm out straight. And again, that's just a very easy minimal cue. If you are an online coach, you have to be very specific and direct with your cues, because essentially you're not seeing the client. You can't feel the client. You can't cue it up right there and then. You have to be very direct with that. And doing things like this, having exercises in place like this, is just very easy. So that brings us on to my next favorite exercise. So that's kind of like one exercise really. It's kind of lat raise, right? But they're kind of the lat raises that I would tend to program. My next favorite exercise is going to be a shoulder press, and specifically a machine shoulder press as well. Now, the shoulder press is kind of shat on by the industry. The industry seemingly doesn't like shoulder presses. It's I think it's mainly from the standpoint of fatigue, but hear me out. We're mainly speaking about a shoulder press. We're mainly speaking about a machine. Machines tend to fit most people. They're kind of designed like that. Again, here they require minimal cues, so you don't have to think the whole time about what you're doing. You just get on the machine and you just push. You can also load the delt very, very effectively. With a dumbbell lat raise, you're essentially putting your your delt in a very compromised position. With a kind of a shoulder press, the weight is directly overhead, so you can load it more efficiently. You can load kind of the delt in a much more effective way. Not better, effective. Now, again, when we speak about kind of loading a shoulder, the caveat to that, or the argument to not having shoulder presses in your kind of workout, in your program, would be the crossover with fatigue, the carryover with fatigue. But I simply find if you program shoulder presses in a higher rep range, specifically like 10 to 20 rep range, you kind of, that argument is kind of like void, because there's not a lot of fatigue there. So it's got a lot of stimulus, you can load effectively, but not enough that carries over fatigue, and it's got a lot of stimulus. I think I might have said that one before, but it's got a lot of stimulus. And also remember, fatigue shouldn't be avoided. Fatigue is often a kind of a byproduct of training hard. It's essentially like a car, right? So you have to imagine that in order for a car to go anywhere, and don't caveat me with, oh, we're all electric, right now we're going to analogize it like a car. In order for a car to go from A to B, there is going to be exhaust fumes. It's essentially that. That's what training fatigue is. Without fumes, the car will not go. It's not working. So fatigue shouldn't be avoided, but it should be managed. Like, we're not going to go into the gym and do 1 rep maxes on kind of shoulder presses. That would be pretty fucking stupid. And there we have it. We have our 2, technically 3, best exercises for delt growth. Now, we specifically touched on medial delt. In another vlog, we're going to be touching on how to get them 3D delts, how to get the rear delts into play, into action. But until then, peace, love, hope you enjoyed, and I'll speak to you very soon.